Welcome, ghouls, demons, and fellow weird ones, and let's drink some moon juice. Alrighty. So, what I wanted to talk about, I guess, is my spiritual background. I've shared the story, briefly or in nuggets, in a variety of different ways, but I guess I just wanted to have a concise video of really just expressing everything that I've gotten into. So yeah, I guess just let's get into it. So when I was really young, this is real. These are real stories. I don't want to. They're cheesy in itself. But I remember being really young, and people always said that I was touched by an angel. That was something that was said about me a lot growing up. I healed my mom, I saved my mom. There was those kinds of things. My parents got divorced when I was 2, and a lot of this was when I was 2, 3 years old. I was just starting to talk, not anything real serious, but I would suggest, supposedly, I don't remember this. This was something I was told. And they said that I asked to go to church. And I brought my mom back to the church, and I thought about that, and I processed that, and if that's something that I actually did, if that's a true thing that I did, I was children are, I think, one of the closest, children and animals are some of the closest expressions of God. And plants, you can, nature, but children, I feel are deeply connected to that, and so that's why they say, you trust. If a child doesn't like you, that means something. If children generally don't like you probably have a bad spirit, or a icky soul or something, So children have always trusted me. But anyway, so if I'm a child and I'm expressing these things, well, I'm speaking of spirituality or whatever through the language that I'm everywhere. Through the language that I'm being taught, which in my cultural lens, I grew up in Farmington, New Mexico. It's a fairly Christian conservative town. It's an interesting town. It's up in the Four Corners. You're about 30, 45 minutes away from all the states in the Four Corners. There's the Navajo reservation, there's indigenous culture, it's a weird cultural blend. But I was raised so if I'm talking about God or spirit, essence, whatever, if I'm kind of being this eerie child, it would make sense that they would be oh, you're talking about this, that. They projected their spirituality onto me. That's you being an impressionable child. And I was always deeply spiritual. My soul has always had a deep calling. I looked up to Mother Teresa because, again, I wanted to know about spiritual leaders, and I was just really curious about voices, not really activists, I don't want to use that word, but I guess that is missionaries, I wanted to teach the word of God. I was very passionate about that, which is interesting to me because I don't know many young children because my family will tell you I did it all on my own, which I find to be really interesting. For a variety of reasons, but I also do see that there was a projection of that, for them to digest what it was that I was expressing in my young unfiltered vessel, body, mind, psyche, consciousness. They were oh, this is what you have to be talking about. Went to church, found a church, and was oh, well, then I'm ready to get baptized. I felt I really understood the teachings of Jesus, and all of those things. It's funny to me how a lot of people, my family, of Christians I know, that people don't seem to understand that I know the Christian faith. I studied it for a good portion of my life. I'm not uneducated. I have read the whole Bible. It doesn't mean I've had the whole Bible memorized. It doesn't mean I read it cover to cover. I cookbook read. I've always have, but when something is significant, I'll go through it. So there was phases of different things, and I digested things. I studied, took the studies seriously, took the sermons seriously, but This is something I mentioned in my transformation podcast. I was having a completely different perspective and conversation than everyone else was. So I'm like the people of the church, my family, I'm like, okay, like I'm taking these teachings of Jesus seriously. Like that's not what fucking Jesus is not saying any of these things. Like, and then I would kind of talk with my mom a little bit. I could see where she had like conflict with like her more like liberal side and her cultural upbringing of this conservatism, and like I could see a war within my mom at a really young age, you know, a variety of different things. You know, she's a nurse, she's contemplated like abortion, and like, you know, we've had like controversial conversations in my household. So it's interesting. My environment of upbringing is very interesting, and the complexity of it, of like how much respect I have for my mother and how much pain and disdain I have. But this is all part of it. So through these like conversations where my mom was, you know, kind of like a devil's advocate, like my mom and I had some really cool conversations. And so I think that really helped her with her spiritual experience and her faith, because my mom has, like I said, my mom has gone through a lot. I really do feel for the circumstances that my mom has had to endure. And so I always like wanted to be there for her. But the more I was there for her, the more spiritual, like I was pouring into her spiritually, because I took the teachings of the church so seriously, and then I was witnessing that in my home, and I needed to heal the home. Like that's how it felt, because I was there for my mom in some really dark times. Like there was a lot of shit that we went through. Some of it I would argue was unnecessary. Other parts of it absolutely necessary, I guess. Like do I blame my mom for the decisions that she made, or do I hold grace for her and that she made the best decisions that she could? But we were really struggling with a lot, and I was really trying to hold on to my faith, and the more I questioned my faith, like when I became uncertain in my faith, I feel like that really triggered something within my mom, because we were dealing with a lot of like really intense things, and so she was like really like, no, you have to be certain in your faith. And there's parts of me that looks back at that and is like, oh, like just I guess like to give myself some credit for the healing essence that I had in my family. I think my faith like healed, like created good opportunity in my family. I feel like that essence was taken advantage of in my family a lot, on how much I was able to heal people from a really young age. And I don't mean heal people in like a psychotic way, but just my presence is naturally healing. I know the right thing to say at the right time. People feel safe in my essence. I have a high emotional intelligence. I've had a high emotional intelligence from a really young age. There are many witnesses to that. And so like attaching that to spirituality and like, okay, this is like the path I'm going to set myself out on. Like I took those studies very seriously. I was going to be a nun. I was an annoying Christian person who wanted to have a Jesus birthday party. And I guess like, it's funny, it felt cringy to, like, it felt like an embarrassment to everyone. Like that wasn't cool. And here's the thing, it wasn't cool in how like people would view it through like a distorted Christian lens. But what was cool about it is that I knew who I was and what I wanted to do. And it's like, listen, like this is my birthday, we want to celebrate me. Like I want to talk about these topics. Like I wanted to learn. I wanted to have like high intellectual conversation. It's kind of how I've like reflected upon. As a child, that's you know, like through my child lenses, I was just showing who I was, and I just wanted everyone to be a part of it. And it's my birthday, and I get to do what I want. So I want to have a Jesus birthday party because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm meant to preach. I'm meant to teach people the word of God. It's a really interesting, I'm not really, it's maybe ego. I don't know. It's annoying because like when you say it in that way, it sounds like you're insane. It sounds like you lost your marbles. Like, but I don't mean it in a psychotic direction. Essentially, I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a philosopher, that I wanted to study theology, sociology, psychology. I wanted to be more in that shamanistic element. Like, there's so many different mediums, but this skill, this essence, is a job title that has been bestowed upon a variety of people throughout history. So there's no reason to think that it's insane for me to think that that has been my purpose since birth, that I've known myself. I've had these special interests in a really eerie way. It's been well known, and that's also where a lot of people are like, what happened to you? Because you became so dark and now you're like anti-Christian, and I'm anti-Christian conservatism. I'm anti this corruption of Christianity. I firmly believe in the teachings of the Bible from a deconstructive academic perspective, and that is an important distinction that gets lost in translation often in my stance and my belief system. So I always like to remind people of that. But as my faith, through like rough experience in life, like my faith just really shattered. It was really questioning a lot. Probably around like 8 years old, it went from blind faith to like skeptical faith. And I was like, okay, well, this is what it says, but this is not what's happening. Like, I asked some really hard questions to some really uneducated Sunday school teachers. I asked some really difficult questions I don't think my mom knew how to answer. And I think that's the truth for a lot of kids. I think our adults are afraid to tell them. That's another aspect of it. So I think it's important for there to be a rule in society where we don't fucking lie to kids, but that's a whole other thing. But so anyway, I was really struggling. I started to feel like super depressed and suicidal. I felt like something was wrong with me, and the church told me that I was suicidal. Because I was welcoming the devil through the music that I liked, the way I chose to express myself. Everything about me was wrong, and it like was reiterating a wound that my family didn't understand, like the goth thing. Like that was a authentic, inspired act of self-expression. Green Day came out because I didn't think about like, well, you dress the way that you dress until I was in 3rd grade, and not really, I wouldn't say bullying, but I know I was aware of how different. I think you just start to notice things as a kid, where it's like, well, my mom buys me these clothes and I kind of pick them out, and yeah, I do like it, but like, do I want to make a different choice? There's so many different styles. The Matrix was out, like that was a big thing. Like I wanted to be this like, I don't know, I love the Trinity, like cool girl look, but I also really loved like Britney Spears, and like there was alternative styles, but like I was just getting really into fashion. But then I was also going through like a really, really hard time. And then Green Day's American Idiot came out. Boulevard of Broken Dreams was my song. But that invocation, I firmly believe is an invocation because Billie Joe Armstrong of Green Day is an Aquarius sun with an Aries moon. I can't remember the rest of his chart. I did look into it, but I love that inner connection. But to me, it was a deeply spiritual experience. Like I resonated with the emotion, and it was an artistic expression. And I don't want to say it was separate from my religious beliefs or like spiritual like faith or anything. If anything, it affirmed how I was feeling and these perspectives and these questions that I was having. American Idiot was a deeply like there is a lot within that album, especially if you're thinking about it intellectually and like the words, and like it's a brilliant album. Like fuck all you critics, I will die on this hill of just what a masterpiece that was. And Green Day, like, they deserved the boom that they got from it, because that's why it worked. Because it was just like, yes, chef's kiss. Like, there's so much revolutionary, like, perspective shift. They shifted a culture of, like, asking really hard questions, which I was asking myself, I was asking people around me, and then I listened to this album and I'm like, this affirms me. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. And so then you start getting into, like, the punk movement and the goth movement, and, like, all these other bands started to come in, and everyone was like, well, you're deeply impressionable, and, well, it's a trend, so it's just a phase. And, like, no one took me seriously for how much it inspired me. And then it kind of became this thing that I had to prove. And then I got lost in elitism, which is a whole other side of the spiritual spectrum, where I didn't feel like I started to want to belong somewhere, but I was, like, exiled from, like, spiritual, because the only spirituality, especially at this age of mine, between, like, 8 to 12 years old, you are either a Christian or an atheist, or, like, devil worshiper. So there's 3 things you could be. You were either some type of Christian, Mormon, Catholic, Baptist, blah, 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 or you were an atheist, which meant you believed in nothing, or you were a devil worshiper. Like, there were 3 things that you could be, and everyone fit into those boxes. That's the perspective of it. And so I was like, well, I'm not a devil worshiper, because why would you worship? Why would you want bad things? That means if you want bad things, you're a bad person. You know what I mean? And that gets into definitions and other realms of things. So please take that in a nuanced sense. But I also don't think that I don't think atheists are bad people. And when I talk to devil worshippers, they don't seem like bad people either. So I really got into the state of questioning. But when I was really, really, really suicidal, having bad dreams, like, I really don't even know what it was, because I didn't want to. There was this urge that I needed to. It was like a siren call. It was like a hex. It was this, it meant it could be mental illness, or just like a intrusive thought that I didn't know how to cope with. There's so many I don't know what it is. There's a variety of possibilities, but I just remember feeling haunted by this urge that I had to die, that I was going to die. I don't know if this was like existential dread, but there was such a fear of death all around me. I was terrified of every accidental way that you could die. And everyone was like, it's because you're listening to that heavy metal music. And I was like, to me, it was not the same. It was coming to an awareness of truth that, like, life isn't rainbows and ponies, and there's, like, an illusion of security, and that, like, anything could happen to you at any moment. There was layers to what this was, but it really caused me to question this spiritual faith that I was so anchored in. Like, I'm going to be a Hierophant. I'm going to be a philosopher. I'm going to be a theologian. I never say that fucking word right. But I'm going to study theology. I was always interested in cultural studies, like history. That side of it was one of my favorite things. That and English lit, where I could read and learn, like, more historical things. I love that side of culture. I love learning about culture. And so I went from being really sure of myself to being incredibly insecure and not fully aware of why. I just wanted to be myself, and I just wanted to feel safe in my own skin, but I was different from everybody else, and all of this stuff was happening around me, and it just was like I felt exiled, and I felt like I wasn't allowed to live. It's not that I wanted to die, but I felt like I was something that was not supposed to exist. It's a really interesting sensation to have. And I, like, when I talk to my mom, how the fuck do you handle that? I think she handled me and my feelings, she did not do a good job. It was not perfect in any means, but I kind of, when if your kid tells you this or is along this, how the fuck do you handle that? I do think that it's a lack of education in parents and the human experience and all the above, but I also think like I was an intense child to have in a variety of different ways, and I think my mom was drowning with her own set of problems, and there's a lot that goes into it, but I remember not feeling supported. I think my mom really tried to support me. I give her a lot of grace, but I was just like, what everyone was, my grandmother, everybody was just like, what the fuck? And so I was just like, well, I just can't be who I am. I have to change, I have to fit in or whatever. And so then like, but I was really feeling disconnected from like God or spirit, the universe, whatever. Like, but that connection where, you know, I would sit in my bed at night and I would look up at the ceiling and I would talk to all the family members. I would talk to the ancestors. I remember talking and praying because it was like, well, yeah, they're up in heaven. So anytime you want to talk to them, and that I think is you know, in spirituality they talk about ancestral work. I think that it's just not like a literal heaven, but it is like a beautiful metaphor because through that visualization, I connected a channel, and I blatantly was talking to my grandfather's mother, Mary Beth. Like I do remember talking to her. She's one of the only few ancestors that I knew that died, that I had like a relationship to, and that was I was living in my mother's old room, like so. Like there's like ghost stories, okay, and there's like weird things. And so here's the thing, my mom will say she also sees ghosts and spirits. Like my mom has had these spiritual connections. So like none of this stuff was weird, but it was all through a Christian lens of spiritual truth. But I was really questioning the Christian box. Not so much the philosophy, not so much the essence of what I knew this was supposed to be. I was like, this is not what it is. Like what we're living, what we're doing, what we're seeing, this is not what this is. And so I was like, it was so corrupted to me that I went to find the truth about everything. But there was a long period of time where I guess like autopilot, lost in limbo, not really connecting to that spiritual side of me. I was just deeply sad all the time. I was really just trying to survive. I quit writing. So I started writing. Like Green Day, that 4th grade year really inspired so much for me to question everything, to get deeply introspective, to write, to create. To me it was beautiful. And then it just was slowly chipped out of me until I just kind of gave up doing anything. And there's so many different things with that, but I read so many books. I tried to hold on for so long, but then when I was probably about in high school, probably 9th grade when I met Nick, there's distraction, there was trauma, there was a variety of different things that I was too young to handle, or too mature to handle. Maybe I was the right age, but I didn't, that was one of the first times in my life that I didn't feel emotionally intelligent. I felt weak and vulnerable. I started to feel that way in like 8th grade. Like, I really felt that way in 5th grade. 5th to 6th grade, that was when like the suicidalism was really heavy. And so from that time period, but I was just like, I really anchored down my faith. I read a lot of spiritual books. The Case for Faith, like, it's kind of interesting when I think of the books that I read for how young I was. That was pretty intense adult philosophy or literature, depending on how you want to. But I was just like, I really just was like, I have to believe, I have to keep the faith, and I need something that is going to convince me to not give up. I need something that's not going to convince me to give up. So there was that deep heaviness, but then there was another heaviness that happened in 8th, in 9th grade. And then it just kind of became about, well, I just wanted to live I thought, well, finally I'm a teenager, so I'm going to have my teen movie arc, right? this is where my life is going to change. And I was really harboring onto that. And so I latched on to the first guy that gave me attention, and he was awful. And that was a whole other thing. And that's when I really, I would say, people would ask, I'd be like, yeah, I believe in God, sure, you know? But after that situation with Nick and everything that came from that mixed in with my family, there was nothing worth believing in anymore. And then it was just survival autopilot from there. And so where I think like I was destructive and I don't know, I wouldn't say I was trying, like those weren't like the subconscious like suicidal things. That's when I was a lot older, which I had mentioned before. But like it was a really weird zombified, dissociated state. And I was just, people did whatever they fucking wanted to me. I was numb to it all, even when I tried not to be. And it was just like, it just became this agnostic experience, which was really interesting. And then it kind of like woken up again, to insert Riley into this. And we had some really cool conversations about music, and it kind of opened my door to someone who saw me, related to me, and that was like one of my first like moments of feeling like just a little bit of what it meant to be alive again. Like that philosophical spark was there, and you know, like I said, him and I had some really cool conversations, and then I started writing again. He like encouraged me and inspired me to start writing again. There was so much genuine love between Riley and I, and what he helped. But because of how broken I was, when that season ended in the way that it needed to, I let it victimize me instead of taking it and alchemizing it, or embrace, like doing anything good with it. I let it bring me down even further, mainly because I think I was just so depleted. Like that was something I should have been able to handle in a better way. But I say that because of how we have handled it over the course of our continued friendship and relationship that we've had. But I definitely needed that moment with him. And I think if other aspects of my life were different, then it wouldn't have played out as, I guess, long as it did. But again, timing for every reason, it was all necessary, right? But I do remember that kind of sparking me back up. And then I had a lot of conversations with a mutual friend, John, and then his brother, Chris, the Fabrino brothers. And like, I was just kind of like in a group of people that like got it. And then like, I was kind of starting to face like my trauma a little bit, or just understanding that like, yeah, no, things have been unfair. And I was starting to kind of get myself, like control of myself again. And it was through a lot of that, because here's the thing, despite the heartache and discomfort and imperfection between the high school relationship between Riley and I, he never had malicious intention for me. And so again, that's where I was healthy. These people didn't have malicious intention for me, and therefore it helped me get through. They were friends along the way in another tunnel. I feel like I was born into the clip off, and then this is my journey out of it. But through these spiritual principles. But anyway, so then I'm I'm introduced to black metal. I'm introduced to a lot of other spiritual philosophy, atheistic Satanism. And so I'm going into all of this, and like, what does all of this like mean? Well, I'm just absorbing it at this time, especially because I wasn't safe to express it, because I had to express myself in a very curated way, but I was like a sponge. And so the mask that I played, people weren't understanding all the things that I was absorbing. I dealt with some supernatural experiences, which my mother and my family do confirm. It's so fucking weird how they treat me the way that they do. when they were witness to these experiences. But we had a cleansing in my house. And that's where I met Kathleen. We called her the voodoo lady. It was a joke. I don't think she practiced voodoo, but she was like this more maybe Wiccan spiritual person. She helped us do this cleansing, and we went through all this stuff, and it opened a whole other world to things. And my mom was working on the reservation. She was a nurse for some Native Americans, variety of different tribes out on the reservations out in New Mexico, and she had a lot of experiences. And she talked to some like medicine men and shamans, or excuse me if I am not giving the proper title, but I learned a lot. Just was learning, just absorbing, just processing and thinking and keeping it all within myself because I wasn't safe to externally express it. And then I kind of just then I just got into a phase of like absurdism, like, oh, nothing matters, so fuck it. Like, a phrase that was said to me that I remember was, God is real, Christians get weird. And I was like, yeah, okay, like, that's my new philosophy. Like, I'm just gonna live my life and honor the life that I was given by having fun, but I was also not having fun in like in healthy, nutritious ways. It was the illusion of fun. It was, you know, what they packaged to you as fun, but is really self-destructive. It was all of these other societal things. Like, you're in a crazy maze once you're born. But the spiritual essence was always there. I was always studying and thinking and just contemplating all of these different things. And you know, I was really into Edgar Allan Poe. I've talked about that a lot. And so that was like one of my main focuses, was I wanted to be a poet like him. I gave up on some of my short stories for a while, and I was really just focusing on poetry and processing these deep emotion. I wanted to write songs and all of these things. And so, you know, this kind of ties into my transformation. But then I meet Christopher, and I was like, yes, like, this is it. I manifested the illusion of the man of my dreams, and like, you know, it's gonna be the thing, because there was so much that I thought I recognized, and it wasn't true, but I wanted it to be true so badly, because like logically, like, I don't understand why it's not true. I don't understand why you're being shady. It's because your intentions are not true. I'm being true, you're being dishonest, which through, again, all of that heartache led me to people telling me to go to therapy, go to God, and find God, all of the above. And I had been graduated from occupational therapy, and, you know, I took a lot of psychology courses, sociology courses. I specialized my occupational therapy career in mental health and human/child development, and I worked with kids, pediatrics, like all of these things. And so I, again, just studied. I was in a deep state of study most of my life, and silent study. I don't think people understood how much I was absorbing and processing, and cause I just, you know, I had a lot to say, but also I don't know how much people were listening, and like there's so many different things, but a lot of stuff I know I've kept to myself for a variety of reasons. And so after when I'm going through that heartache and I'm having all these heart problems, I'm having all these physiological symptoms, and it's like, well, hey, I wanted to die, so this is it. But I was like, do I really want to die? Because everyone was telling me, like, heal, process, heal. And I was like, okay, well, what would I tell? I'm in healthcare. I'm a healer. I'm a healthcare worker. What would I tell a patient? Like, I have all this training. Why am I not applying it to myself? And so started applying things from just a psychological basis of meditation. My chiropractor in Michigan, in Northville, Michigan, or is it Northville or is it Novi? Anyway, it was, I wish I could remember, Health for Life, something like that. I want to give them credit, because my chiropractor there, whose name is just slipping my brain, I can picture him perfectly. I don't know why it's slipping, but he just really inspired me to meditate and do all these things. And so then I started meditating, and then I was powerlifting, and I was doing all this, you know, just like started kind of journaling a little bit, started writing again, like just kind of going back to the drawing board, but keeping God and spirituality out of it, to be grounded. And I just didn't want to get lost in any blind faith ever again, and all the religious trauma that came from everything. And so from there, I started to experience things within my dreams, and then I started, studying Carl Jung and Carl Jung and all of these like other things. And I'm powerlifting, I'm in the gym, and through this expression and other different interconnections and experiences, I meet Breezy, who was a witch, and she talks about this, and I was like, I liked astrology, but I didn't take astrology, not to say it was more pop astrology, because I took it seriously in my interpretation of it, but I also used it for fun. So I was like, I'm Aquarius, like just I knew certain things, and it was more playful and unserious to me. But through her, she initiated me into like witchcraft, and I was like, that's real. Like I had a more like the feminist approach, like it was just like misogynistic, like different other historical perspectives that are probably simultaneously true in a variety of ways. But I was like, there's a Wiccan at my high school, and people made fun of him, but I always he was in my French class, like I didn't mind him. He annoyed me a little bit, like he had like just this kind of specific personality, but I didn't hate him. There's just sometimes he rubbed me the wrong way, but otherwise, like I enjoyed knowing this person existed. What is his name? I can't remember his name either, but there was just this like, okay, and then I was like, it's like Catholic, like, and then all of this was just kind of around me, and I just like listened, and I just absorbed it, just learned about it. And so it was familiar hearing Breezy talk about all this stuff. And so then that's when I started doing like moon rituals, and I started doing all of these other things, and I started to re-study spirituality, but I started to learn the other side. I knew Christianity better than it, like I knew it better than the back of my hand. Like I knew the Bible, I knew Christianity, God, Jesus, I knew that. So I was ready to learn. And then I had this scientific base of humanity through my occupational therapy background, which I will plan on doing a video about that later. So I was like, now it's time for me to learn, the devil worshippers, right? So Christian, atheist, devil worshippers, paganism. It's time for me to learn the left-hand path. It's time for me to open myself up to all of these different principles. And there's parallels in everything. You see the infinity symbol, the yin yang, the poles, like same coin, different sides. You find the mirror within it all. But I take that very seriously. But I'm self-taught. I have dreamed of going to like university and having like a doctorate and all of these things. I always dreamed of going to Harvard. I wanted to be like Elle Woods so bad and go to Harvard school. Even law school, I want to go to law school. So I wanted to study all of these things, but it felt impossible. Belief in myself was drained a lot, and so then it didn't happen. But I still taught myself. I altered the path. The path for me to achieve it in the conventional way, in the way that I thought I would achieve it, seemed impossible, but what's meant for you never passes you. And so I stayed dedicated in my own intuitive way in all of these different experiences. I gave up on the universe never gave up on me, and surrounded me through my entire journey back to myself, and back to my spiritual connection. And I found that through left-hand path principles and more Luciferianism, if I have to give a title, but they say it's the gray path, the middle path, the balanced path. I don't fit into a box. I see everything, whether it's satanic, demonic, or angelic and Christian. Like, I don't care what projection you want to label it as. I know it and see it in everything, and I feel like everyone is just having their own version of that. And I think that is really beautiful. I think diversity is beautiful, just like you don't love just one book and only one book. Like, that was something I went through to bridging Green Day, is I used to think I had to be loyal to this one band and be obsessed with it and love it to death because it was disloyal for me to enjoy other art, and I don't know where that came from, but it's insane. So that's the same thing with like spirituality and like God and all of those things, is you don't have to, you can have your practice and your set, but you can still be open and loving to other projects and experiences. And if it's really not in your preference and you don't like to visit that world, like if you don't like horror movies, don't watch them. If you don't want to dive whatever into like the left-hand path and that thing, like, you know, if your soul's not ready for it, it's not ready for it. If you're experiencing it in a different lens, totally fine. Like, it's kind of all the same. That was my discovery. And so it's setting the intention and how you want to build your life, and having a strong relationship with yourself, and coexisting and co-creating with the gods, the universal energies that be. It's the blending of culture, it's the cultural love and appreciation, and the journey of the human experience as the universe is experiencing itself, and all the potential possibilities of what could possibly exist, right? In a nutshell, loosely, there's a lot of nuance into all of this, but that's just kind of like a background on like my spiritual journey and insights and knowledge. I'm not an uneducated bimbo. That has been something that I have been called before. I know people, I don't know. I've tried to refine how I present myself, but I also firmly believe in my right to self-expression, and this is the intuitive call of what I anchored into, what Legally Blonde represented for me as a child. That was an inner child anchor. She never sacrificed herself. She's always really true to herself, and she still achieves amazing things. And that is, I think, a healing of the feminine. There's a lot of different representations in that. And so that would be honoring the divine feminine within me, and the rebirth of what would be, like Mary Magdalene, because, Christianity wrote out Jesus's partner, and then there became this abstinence and celibacy and like virgin thing, which is just a suppression of the shadow, which causes chaos and turmoil, and it allows corruption to exist. So anyway, with any of that, if people have like more specific questions on like left-hand path things that I've read, like, let me know. I'm not too sure how much I want to dive into that, because I started posting on TikTok and I've been fairly vocal about things, but I do write a lot of my own interpretation as I study. That's what my lunar memoirs are about. That's what a lot of my writing is about. And a lot of the contemplation, this is all theoretical, essentially. The only truth that we know is death. We all know that inevitably we will die. So live in the present moment, right? That's a huge spiritual lesson. But equally, have fun exploring the possibilities of what consciousness and creation is. And I think the more you learn about consciousness and creation, the more present and alive you feel to express yourself in the way that you were created or born or manifested. So I think that we should all follow our joy and what it means to be ourselves with a integrated shadow. And that is my balance and my TED Talk on Christianity to Satanist to Sarah, or Melanoe Morningstar, and the balance of all of what that represents. So thanks for listening. Thanks for drinking some moon juice, and I will talk with you guys next time.